We have Lillian Wingate, Executive Director of the Thomasville Genealogical Library. We have Austin Bell from Thomasville History Center. Sarah Byrne, the museum educator from the Hadley Black History Museum. Whitney White, the Executive Director of the Pebble Hill Plantation. And Nancy Tinker, Executive Director of Thomasville Landmarks. All right, I'll go ahead and let the first person. Do you want to go, Lillian, or is it Austin? Okay. Come on up.
Good morning, everybody. The coolest podium I've ever seen. I these existed. So I'm Austin Bell. I'm the Executive Director for the Thomasville History Center. I just started in this role less than 2 months ago, so back in late August. So if anything, looks like or sounds like I don't know what I'm talking about, it's probably because I don't. But I'm very excited to be here with my colleagues from Thomasville, who I'm excited to work together with and collaborate on many future projects. And so what I'll do is just talk a little bit about the History Center, what we do, and then I'll pass it along to the next person. So, and just for context, I have worked in the museum field since, I went to college, got a master's in museum studies, and prior to this was working down in Tallahassee at the Museum of Florida History as a curator there, and then another small historical society and museum in Southwest Florida for a little more than 10 years where I was a curator. So that's kind of where I'm coming from into this. So I'm a newbie to Thomasville. And so the Thomasville History Center, it really started with a desire to document the history of Thomas County, and with the formation of the Thomas County Historical Society in 1952. And it's really evolved into our current role as a museum and research center. And so it opened as a museum in 1972 at the Flowers Roberts House, which is this building here on the first slide. And it was actually built on the site of a former mansion that burned down previously. In 1923, it was built on top of this former mansion that was built in 1893. And since 1972, our collection has grown to include more than 500,000 items and archival materials and 8 historic structures across our property. And so our mission is to connect the Red Hills past with its present to inspire and enrich current and future generations. And our vision of the Thomasville History Center is that we are the gateway for the stories of the Red Hills, fostering an atmosphere that enhances a vibrant and innovative community. And as a respected leader in our sharing our distinctive history, we create experiences that are community connected, dynamic, engaging, and inspiring for all. And we did do a rebranding from Thomas County Historical Society back in 2018 when we became the Thomasville History Center. And so, as I mentioned, we've got at least 8 different buildings on our property. This is an aerial view and then a map showing them on more than 3 acres. And those buildings include the Flowers Roberts House, which you saw on the first slide, built in 1923. We also have probably our most popular building is our 1896 bowling alley, which is that long structure, the long yellow one on the map. And it's believed to be the 2nd oldest bowling alley left in the United States, and it's built from heart pine. And it's just got all these really unique features, and including our visitors can actually take a small bowling ball and roll it down the lane and knock down the pins, which kids love to do. You do have to set the pins back up, which is the end of a very long alley. And so that was actually when the original 1893 family was living there and their house burned down, they moved into the bowling alley and lived there. So that's one of the buildings that's actually original to the site for a time. And there's a picture of the bowling alley at the top right there. We also have the Smith Homestead, which is several buildings. You can see on the map here up to the left, the log cabin. They're all circa 1870, and they were collected from different places around Thomas County and belonged to different families where they were brought together and sort of represented that life on the pioneer homestead in 1870. One of the homes belonged to Cecilia and Rufus Smith family from Coolidge, and they lived there with their 5 children and farmed nearly 500 acres. And so that house was donated to the History Center in 1974. In the top left, that large white building, you can't really see it under the trees in the aerial. That's the Metcalf Courthouse. You can see a picture of it here on the left. You can see it better. This is the courthouse from Metcalf, Georgia, but it was actually never used for court. It was a meeting place for the residents of Metcalf and was the voting location for every election up until 2002. And so in 2003, it was in bad shape, and it was put up for auction by the county, and the Historical Society won the bid, and it was moved to the grounds in 2004. And then we have the Joyner-Callaway House, which is this house on the bottom right here with the white picket fence. Really cute house. It was belonged to a woman named Emily Joyner, who was a Civil War widow. She purchased that house in lot in 1877 for $125. And so it actually moved slightly on the property over the years, but is a wonderful example of adaptive reuse. She actually put the two buildings together originally herself. So, and then we have one building that's not historic, which is the 𝘗𝘭𝘭𝘢𝘆 shed. And me, I'm from South Florida, so I came to Georgia and I saw this word P-I-L-A-U, and I said, "What? That's Pilo? No, it's 𝘗𝘭𝘭𝘢." And I'm learning. So we have a shed on the property that we use for a big annual event that we host in November. More than 1,000 people come out and hang out on the grounds and try our chicken and rice dish, the 𝘗𝘭𝘭𝘢. It's going to be a fun time for everybody. And we also have a historic playhouse. It's a very small, little white structure above the bowling alley, which belonged to there were two of them and belonged to the Flowers family, a prominent family in Thomasville, and were moved around depending on how old the kids were in the family. So we go from one kid to the next, and eventually it was donated, one of them, to the History Center. And so now it's a fun place for kids to continue to learn and play. And then we also have our garage, 1942 garage with some really awesome cars and a fire truck, which I think I have a picture of here on one of the next slides. So those are all on our 3-acre campus. And then we also oversee management of the Lapham Patterson House. And so this is a little bit unique in that the state owns this property, but they, and for a long time, they ran it as the Department of Natural Resources ran it from 1974 till 2009 as a historic house museum, at which point they ceased operations. And so we negotiated for a concession agreement in which we could reopen the house and assume the management of the operation. So it's just across the street and 2 houses down, basically, from the History Center. So now we have tour guides there, docents that do 3 to 5 tours per day, Thursday through Saturday, and give people guided tours of this really unique 1885 house that is on the National Register of Historic Places and is a National Historic Landmark and is really one of the more iconic buildings in Thomasville. And there's just a couple more shots. So you can see it's got a beautiful backyard where we also, of course, host events and sometimes rentals for weddings. We have one coming up next weekend. Educational program is core to our mission and a big part of what we do. We have all sorts of ways we conduct outreach to school groups, K through 12 education. We have independent explorer programs, so basically activity packs or travel trunks that we provide to schools that are up to the standards of Georgia history standards of excellence in schools for K through 12. We have what's called history hangouts, where we have the field trips, from local schools, and kids get an extended tour, 2 to 3 hours. And then we also have deep dives where we have our educators actually go out and put on programs for the youth groups in our community. And we also have an apprentice program, which is grades 9 through 12. It's a school year-long immersion into the world of museums and public history, where these students come and learn about what it means to be a museum professional. And they come back not just for 1 year, a lot of them come for 2, 3, or 4 years. And so they're really prepared as they move into maybe college to think about pursuing a career in museum or public history. We also have our summer camps, Camp Dawson and Arca Camp. Camp Dawson is for younger kids, and we have some really great, it's a week-long program in the summer, and then ARCA Camp is for 6th to 8th graders, and they learn about architecture. And you can't really see very well on this picture in the bottom left, but each student designs their own building, and then they bring them all together in a neighborhood. And this one, I believe this one had an HOA this past year, so things get pretty, pretty intense. But it's a really great learning opportunity and experience for these young kids interested in history. And then, of course, our research and collections is a huge part of what we do. I mentioned we have 500,000 objects and archival materials, and our curators will know a great deal more than I about that. I'm still working my way into them, but there's so much important history there regarding, genealogy, history of Thomasville, and many of those collections are available online, but 500,000, I think we probably have about 30,000 online in our searchable database. And let's see. And so we offer, our curators will provide in-person research by appointment. Anybody interested in anything in our collections, they can stop by the museum. We have a great workspace for them to dive in and see what they can uncover. And we get quite a few research requests and like to work with other organizations as well in their research interests. So, and so that's pretty much just my brief introduction. We're a small staff. We have 4 full-time people, 3 part-time employees. Our budget's about $450,000. And as I said, I'm just starting out and just learning not only where I work, but also the community where I live. But it's such a wonderful, warm place to be, and to be able to be invited to this panel and, help represent Thomasville is just very exciting. I'm from South Florida. That's where I grew up. I was born and raised. And so, I'm not used to people just being so openly warm and inviting and collegial. And so anyway, so I'll pass it off to the next person, but thank you very much for your time this morning.
Yeah, there's a button that'll lower the. We can see it. Yes.
And this is advancement. Okay, well, good morning. My name is Whitney White, and I am the Executive Director of Pebble Hill Plantation. So I want to share with you a little bit about Pebble Hill, its history, our collections. And so the property was established in 1825 by Thomas Jefferson Johnson. He was a wealthy planter who grew the traditional cash crops. And at the time of his death, there were 21 people listed as enslaved on the property. It passed to his daughter, Julia Ann, and her husband, and she and they continued the same practice of agricultural use of the property through the Civil War. Following that, she was a widow. She held on to the property for many years, but you can see the state of the main house there just prior to the turn of the 20th century. Thomasville became a huge winter resort town in the late 1800s, and the wealthiest people in the country were coming to Thomasville, and I'd be willing to bet none of you had heard of it much before maybe you read about this, but I hope that's not the case. But Howard Melville Hanna from Cleveland, Ohio, came and bought Pebble Hill in 1896. Now, what drew these Northerners there was our mild climate and our hunting and shooting. And so these plantation properties, their agricultural use had ended with the war and the years following, and so they became winter homes. Mr. Hanna bought it in 1896, turned around in 1901 and gave it to one of his daughters, Kate. She refurbished and restored many of the buildings, as many as she could on the property, and started expanding it in terms of acreage as well as buildings. Upon her death in 1936, she passed it to her daughter, known as Pansy. Pansy and her husband never had children, and she loved Pebble Hill, and her desire was to see it open to the public. And so we opened in 1983. But because she wanted you to experience the plantation in situ, she left it with all of its original collections, furniture, furnishings, and they kept incredible records of things, which we'll talk about a little bit. We are a 501c3 and listed in the National Register of Historic Places. So when I say that Kate expanded it, this is an aerial shot from 1938. Now, the main house that you saw in the very dilapidated condition, she had renovated, but unfortunately in 1934, it burned. And so the house in the long white house you see in the middle there is what she rebuilt. And so that's the current main house that still stands today. And so she also added stables and a number of outbuildings. But all of the buildings that stand today were built after 1900 under Kate or under Pansy. We have nothing from the antebellum period left due to storms, fire, just the state of the buildings. So there's nothing to show, if you will, from that era. View of the interiors of the home. This is probably the most photographed and well-known room, and it has a mural all the way around of the flora and fauna of Southwest Georgia. In 2011, the Board of Trustees took the second floor of the house and made an art gallery because the family had an incredible collection of sporting art. And so that's what's housed there. It also allows us to bring in traveling exhibitions, as well as curating our own temporary exhibitions. Next year, 2026, is the bicentennial year for Thomasville, and we will be curating an exhibit on 200 years of Pebble Hill history. Few shots of the grounds. I do want to draw your attention to the bottom middle. That log cabin schoolhouse is today the oldest building on the property, having been built in 1901. Now, to turning a little bit to some of our archives, that is Pansy with then Governor Carter when he visited Pebble Hill in 1973. You can see where he signed the guest book there. And the letter is from a 2012 inquiry we made to just ask him to send us something for the archives of recalling his visit there. Easter was a huge celebration at Pebble Hill. Kate started the entertainment activity shortly after she took over in 1901, and it ran until 1940. But it topped out at about 2,000 people each Easter Sunday afternoon. The family and their guests threw the party for their staff and their families. And eventually it grew to neighboring plantations, their staff and families. They were incredible record keepers. So on the bottom left, that's where they tracked in that ledger how many packets of Easter egg dye, how many eggs, what went in each basket, down to the penny. And on the top right is invaluable information. They issued tickets to Easter by household. So we have a listing of who was living on the property, who was living in the house, what their age was at the time. We have similar Christmas records, which include the sizes, because a lot of times part of the gifts would be clothing. And so we have those. Sarah will talk more about the Jack Hadley Black History Museum, but Jack Hadley is a very good friend of Pebble Hill. And when he was beginning his museum, the family loved to photograph at Pebble Hill. And we have got thousands of photographs, not just of themselves, of the buildings, of the grounds, of life at Pebble Hill, of their staff, things like Easter and Christmas. And so Jack came out and copied all of our photographs, and many of what he has today came from our archives. And you can see him with our curator on the bottom right. He's been a speaker for us, a tour guide for us, and just really an invaluable resource that we call on. We say we're one of his biggest cheerleaders, and we hope the same is true. His family has a long-standing connection to Pebble Hill. In 2011, we worked with our local Thomas University to begin a GPS mapping of our workers' cemetery. And then in 2021, as technology had advanced, we were able to create the storyboard, which is now searchable on our website. And there are 169 graves in that, marked graves in that cemetery. And we hope to eventually overlay the Christmas records, the Easter records, the payroll records that we have, so that you really can have a great resource there for the workers. And Lillian is working with our curator on some projects there. So on top of taking photographs, they also took home movies. And there is a 26-second clip of a baseball game. being played. And you'll see the Pebble Hill baseball team there. That was a photograph from 1921 of the team. And the researcher with the University of Georgia started looking into this, and they have discovered that it's the oldest moving picture imagery of organized Black baseball. And the book called Black Ball, the cover there is from the Pebble Hill game, has an entire chapter on the research and the Pebble Hill baseball team. On the bottom left, I'm also a big baseball fan. So in Cooperstown at the National Baseball Hall of Fame, they were putting in an exhibit on Black baseball called The Souls of the Game, Voices of Black Baseball. And that 26-second clip is a part of that exhibition. Now, you may recognize the gentleman on the bottom right as retired General Lloyd Austin. And he's pictured there with his brother Morris. They visited Pebble Hill earlier. They grew up in Thomasville, and their grandfather, who Lloyd Austin's namesake, Lloyd Austin, is one of the baseball players on this particular team. We were able to take a worker's house and turn it into permanent exhibition space in 2023. And it was built for the kennel manager, known as the Kennel Cottage. And we are able to curate photographs and text. And this is something, again, as with the storyboard with the worker cemetery, we hope to just grow this to make this a place where you can come and learn about what staff life was like from working there. Most of them lived on the property. And so this kennel manager's house sits very centrally located within the museum area. So it has become a very popular exhibit. And Thomasville Landmarks, thank you, Nancy, awarded us with an award of stewardship for the project. And we were able to have that ribbon cutting. Eric Meninger is in the audience today. Thank you very much. Yeah. So Nancy will talk about him as well. But thanks to Nancy, we were introduced to Eric, who did a conditions assessment of Piney Grove Church, which sits on Pebble Hill today, and then the historic resource survey of Pebble Hill. We have 3,000 acres, and all of the little purple things, circles there, are assets. We thought we had 60 some odd. 105, according to Eric. So a lot to maintain and upkeep. But we do work closely with the other museums and cultural sites in Thomasville. And in 2022, the directors decided that not only did we need to meet regularly, which we were doing and talk about things, but how good it would be for our staff to tour each other's sites, not just to see the public spaces. We all have challenges. We are all small organizations. We don't have Georgia archive storage. We all might salivate over it, but we work with what we have. And so it was great to be able to see the back storage areas, the areas that, oh, that's where you store this, or, oh, okay, I've never thought of turning that into a bookshelf, that kind of thing. And our staff have learned so much through that. And as new staff come on, we try very hard to get them out here. Austin, we gave him a little bit of time to settle in, and then he's on our come visit us and see the back areas tour. And I think Sarah's going to talk about, but the Thomasville History Center and a professor at FSU got an NEH grant in 2023 to bring educators from all over the country to Thomasville. And we hosted them for a day there. And Jack Hadley came out and did a tour of the grounds along with us. And we showed them other things and talked about these 20th century sporting estates. We do host a number of annual events every year. In addition to this, we have programming. We, of course, tour school children through. We do weddings on the grounds and events. So if you are in Thomasville, or if you make a destination trip to visit us, go to our website and learn about what is going on with us. So anyway, thank you so much, Lillian, for getting all of us here, and all of you for being here this morning. So thank you.
So my name is Sarah Byrne, and I'm the museum educator at the Jack Hadley Black History Museum. So I like to start with a little introduction or timeline to the museum. So our story begins in 1936 when Mr. James Jack Hadley is born in Thomasville. So he's actually born on Pebble Hill Plantation. His father served as the chauffeur there for over 50 years for the family. 20 years later, Mr. Hadley graduates from Douglas High School, which is the all-black segregated city high school in Thomasville, enlists in the United States Air Force a couple weeks later. 1979, Mr. Hadley and his family are stationed on Lindsay Air Force Base in Wiesbaden, Germany. His son Jim comes home and says that his school is not doing anything to celebrate Black History Week. So Mr. Hadley and Jim come together, take photos, collages, anything out of Ebony and Jet magazines, and make posters for Jim to take and display. And that is really the start of Mr. Hadley's collection. 1984, retires from the Air Force after 28 years, returns to Thomasville 2 years later. He's doing traveling displays, taking things in his truck, just trying to collect and get anything that he can. 1995, figures out that he needs to get his nonprofit status. He also gets his first board at the time. Early 2000s, the museum, actually Douglas School is closed and bought. So like I said, it was the segregated city high school up until 1970. It became an integrated middle school, then elementary school being shut down due to low enrollment. The Douglas alumni actually convinced the Board of Education to sell it, and they bought all the property, a football field down the road, all the buildings, and everything inside of it for $20. Yeah. And then 2006, the museum opens, and we are in our current site at the Douglas High School right now. Our museum is split into 3 galleries. We have about 5,000 pieces on display in our collection, but we have about 15,000 pieces in total. Gallery 1, I'm going to show you all a couple different pieces. Gallery 1 focuses on national history. So we always like to highlight Lieutenant Henry Flipper. Lieutenant Flipper, born enslaved in Thomasville, was brought up to Atlanta, and he actually went on to become the first Black graduate from West Point, went on and became a Buffalo soldier, and really incredible career with them. Right under, we have Lieutenant Colonel Henry Buford Perry, and he's actually one of 3 Tuskegee Airmen from Thomasville. We actually have his flight suit on display inside of the museum. Up at the top, we have Richard Hadley's bullhorn. So Mr. Hadley's grandfather was born enslaved. From the time he was a child in the 1820s until the 1860s, his job every single day was to use this bullhorn to wake people up in the morning, call them in to nurse babies. And it's just a really incredible piece that we have in our collection. And right under, we have a photo and some gear of Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin, first African-American to serve in this position. He's actually a Thomasville native. Now, Gallery 2 focuses on local history. The top photo is one of my favorite pieces in the museum. So this is actually Mr. Hadley and his wife, Christine's wedding photo. So this was taken at their senior prom, but they did not have photographers at their wedding, so they claim that this is their wedding photo. But they've been married for almost 70 years. Right under is a newspaper clipping from the Thomasville Times Enterprise, which highlights Thomasville's first Black mayor, Earl Williams, and he became mayor in 1986. In the middle, the top photo, if you look at the little boy in the front in the white shirt, that is actually Mr. Hadley whenever he was in 3rd grade. And right under is his childhood home at Pebble Hill Plantation. The top right is Dr. Eliza Greer, and she was actually Thomasville's first Black female doctor, and she became a doctor there in 1890. So really, really incredible. And then right under is Douglas High School. So this is the original school before it was tore down to build the equalization buildings in the late 1950s that we are currently in today. And now Gallery 3 focuses on cultural history. So I'm sure we're all familiar with Jackie Robinson, but a lot of people might not know that Jackie Robinson was actually born in Cairo, Georgia, which is about 15 minutes away from Thomasville. All that's left standing is a fireplace from his childhood home and then a historical marker. So family was only there for a couple of years. They moved to Pasadena, California, so that's what more people are familiar with. But if you look right above him, you see Mac Robinson, which is actually Jackie Robinson's brother. So a lot of people don't know his story. So he competed in the 1936 Berlin Olympics. So I'm sure you all are familiar with Jesse Owens. Yeah. So Mac actually took silver in one of the same events as Jesse. So you had 2 Black athletes taking gold and silver, middle of Nazi Germany. So just really incredible story right there. So in the museum, we actually have his ceremony jacket on display, as well as his running shoes. And if you look at them, they look like bowling shoes. They're flat on the bottom, made of leather, don't have spikes. So people always comment on how uncomfortable it probably was to run in shoes like that. And one of Mr. Hadley's sisters was married to Mac Robinson, so that is how we got those pieces in our collection. In the middle is Dr. Marie Hadley Robinson, not the one married to Mac, but she was actually the first professional opera star from Thomasville. So she was known both nationally and internationally. Really incredible. We've had visitors from across the world come see her photo and say that they listened to her music growing up. All right, and then I know, so we're in Georgia, but we might have some Florida State fans in the audience. Charlie Ward Jr., Thomasville native, went on to lead Florida State to their first national championship, 1993, Heisman Trophy winner for that year. We're very proud of him in Thomasville. He did not get drafted to go and play pro football, but he actually went on and played pro basketball. And today he is the recently hired coach for Florida A&M for basketball. And right under, we have Teresa Edwards, not from Thomasville, but from Cairo. Some people might be familiar with her. But she's actually the most highly decorated Team USA women's basketball player ever. She played in 5 Olympics, 4 gold medals, 1 bronze. She's also the youngest person to ever win a gold medal, and then also the oldest because she played for 20 years. I'm going to briefly talk about our collaboration. So in the top left, every May we have our Historic Preservation Month celebration with Landmarks. This event happens every May, and we really focus on the Imperial Hotel and trying to restore it, which I'll talk a little bit about the Imperial later. Right under, we have the Thomasville History Summer Camps. We've been really blessed to be able to partner with them over the past couple of years and show the kids the Imperial Hotel. And most recently, last year, we got to do a walking and talking tour about the historic Black neighborhood that the museum is settled in, which is called Dewey City. The research partnership between the Thomasville Genealogical Library and the museum has really been essential. We get a lot of African-American families coming back to Thomasville doing family reunions, and we always do not have the resources to help them trace their family history. So they start with us, and then if we can't find it, we always send them to Lillian, and she's just really great with helping them do that. The most important thing for me is the educators group. All the educators from the organizations, we meet about every single month. We work together to talk about programming and just ways that we can support each other and encourage, especially schools, to come and visit our sites. We are currently working on an activity book together to celebrate 200 years of Thomas County history. So that is our current project that we're working on right now. And then Whitney talked a little bit about this earlier, but Pebble Hill and Thomasville History Center have were really incredible with getting this NEH, Quest for Freedom program. We had over 40 educators from across the country come and do different tours and have conversations talking about slavery and its impact all the way through Reconstruction to the Civil Rights Movement in Thomasville. And right under, I always like to talk about this. We don't have a representative from the Center for the Arts in town, but last year, the Jack Hadley Museum and the center were able to collaborate and actually host an exhibit for the history of Ambassador Andrew Young. And we got to host Ambassador Young at the center, and people were able to come and hear from him, and children were able to have a little private tour with him as well. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the Green Book. So if you're not familiar with the Green Book, it was a travel guide for African Americans published between the 1930s and 60s that had different safe hotels, restaurants, businesses, anything that you can think of that you would need while traveling. In Thomasville, we only had one Green Book location, which was the Imperial Hotel. I'm going to briefly touch on it, but then Nancy's going to talk a lot more. It was open from 1949 until 1969, and you can see its listing right there in the Green Book. But we actually have the original Imperial Hotel sign as well. So in 2018, with the help of Thomasville Landmarks and other local organizations, the museum was actually able to purchase the hotel along with an accompanying shotgun house right next door, which leads us to our future plans for the museum. So in the next couple of years, we are actually going to be building a brand new museum located right next to our renovated hotel and shotgun house. This museum is going to be 2 times the size of our current space. It's going to have a dedicated library, education center, an interactive exhibit. It's really going to be a one-of-a-kind space in all of Southwest Georgia. And here's a better picture of what the layout is going to look like. So the blue building will be the museum. The orange building is going to be the Imperial Hotel, and then the white building is going to be our shotgun house that we're going to be renovating. So it's going to be a huge project. We're really, really excited for it, hoping to get at least construction started next year to celebrate Mr. Hadley's 90th birthday. And then thank you all for listening. This is my contact information if you have any questions, but thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Nancy Tinker and am blessed with a very tiny voice. That's okay. We'll shorten this a little bit so we can. Yeah. How's that? Eric, can you hear me back there? Love it. There we go. Thank you, Lillian. I am Nancy Tinker. I'm Executive Director of Thomasville Landmarks in Thomasville, Georgia. It is my great pleasure to serve with this group of friends and talk with you this morning about our work in Thomasville. Most of my remarks this morning will focus on historic structures reports, which Landmarks has done in cooperation with Eric Mininger, who is in the back. And I simply wanted to acknowledge him before I began my remarks. Thank you for joining us, Eric. My organization was created in the late 1960s when the city of Thomasville proposed demolition of the city's 1850s library, the building there on the right, which was a beloved community landmark. Despite objections from local residents, the library building was demolished and moved into the former post office building downtown. This group of citizens then turned attention to the Hd'Bryan House, building here on the right, an 1830s building threatened with demolition by neglect. Incorporating as Thomasville Landmarks, residents formed a preservation organization initially focused on just preserving the Hd'Bryan House. In time, the mission expanded to protecting, preserving, and to promoting Thomas County's historic resources and traditional landscapes. The Hd'Bryan House serves as our headquarters building. In our 56-year history, we've created partnerships with organizations across the county. An early collaboration includes the Hadley Black History Museum, who purchased the Imperial Hotel and Shotgun House in the early 2000s. Constructed in 1949 as a Green Book Hotel, and you all know what that is. I'm just going to divert from my remarks for just a second. The history here is remarkable. The idea for a Green Book Hotel in Thomasville was incepted by an African-American woman who purchased the property, who hired her family of Masons, to design and build the building, which gave African-Americans safe passage and a safe place to eat as they traveled across the South. Built and designed, owned by African-Americans, constructed by African-Americans, managed by African-Americans. I find that history remarkable. As the building, as you can see, desperately needed attention, Landmarks worked with a local foundation to raise funds for roof replacement. Initially, that was the hotel's greatest need, and we were able to acquire funds to put a replacement roof on the building. In time, the Black History Museum acquired property surrounding the hotel, anticipating, as Sarah told you, construction of a new museum. The hotel and the Shotgun House in time will be rehabilitated as museum exhibit buildings. To understand the hotel's physical condition, Landmarks commissioned an historic structures report, or HSR, for both the hotel and Shotgun House, completed by Eric. The resulting HSR became the platform for a grant request to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, who awarded a grant of $150,000 to the museum for a stabilization program for the hotel building. In the spring of 2005, we established a similar relationship with Thomasville's First Missionary Baptist Church when an HSR was completed for this African-American church. The HSR discovered unsuspected movement within the church's historic roofing system and an exterior wall. This discovery led to an engineering consultant who is presently leading an in-depth structural analysis of the church's roofing trusses and building framing system. You all, history and engineering and academia are often not a straight line. And if you initially believe you're headed in this direction and you find yourself making a turn, consider following that path. It can bring great benefit. A completely unanticipated result of these studies led to uncovering FMBC's important role in the civil rights movement, revealing information unknown to the current generation. A very valuable document. Perhaps Landmark's most intriguing partnership has involved Thomasville's Church of the Good Shepherd, an Episcopal church complex constructed in the late 19th century for a small Black African-American congregation. The church's campus is comprised of 3 historic buildings, a sanctuary, parish hall, and vicarage, buildings kind of like legs on a 3-legged stool, which created a place for worship, educational space, and a home for the vicarage's priest. Good Shepherd was among the earliest sites to provide education for the city's Black children as well, and this is important, as well as the adult population. This is even more important. It had a lending library for the African-American community and was the site of the first Black Boy Scout troop in Thomasville. As with other sites, we prepared an HSR for all 3 of Good Shepherd's buildings, using the document to seek inclusion in the Georgia Trust Places in Peril program. The site was listed in 2024. In 2025, we had an opportunity to make application on behalf of Good Shepherd to the Callahan Foundation, requesting replacement roof for the vicarage, and we embedded the HSR in the grant application. The grant was awarded and a new roof was installed on the vicarage this last spring. On a broader scale, in the last year, Landmarks partnered with the city of Thomasville to begin improvements within a public park and to complete rehabilitation of the park's bandstand. Working with local donors, we raised $95,000 to undertake work on the bandstand, with the ribbon cutting and park celebration conducted 2 weeks ago. What began as a basic interest in understanding building conditions, honestly, you all, as we began those projects, it was nothing more than that. We prepared HSRs hoping to understand building conditions, but it's proven to have a greater benefit than that. While recognizing building condition is critical, position of an HSR creates opportunity, and this is super important, to approach donors without wringing your hands. Oh, we have a roof problem. Hand wring. We have a foundation problem. Throw up your hands. This ability to come to them with a document proves that you're a good steward and establishes credibility. It also creates opportunity for engagement in the most unusual places, creating heritage education opportunities with students. Shel Silverstein is one of my favorite writers, and I think of him often when it comes to the despair we can feel in history and in preservation. No, what do we do next? So let me share this with you. Listen to the mustn'ts, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts, the impossibles, the won'ts. Listen to the never haves. Then listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be. Thank you.
A quick question. There's been efforts to dismantle DEI and as well as teaching African American history here in Georgia, as well as around the country. Has that had any impact on any of your all's ability to get donations or actually get grants from the federal government or the state?
I think that is better suited for one of my friends here.
When we do the panel discussion, we can talk about that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for having the right height for me. So my name is Lillian Wingate, and I am the new executive director of the Thomasville Genealogical Library. As we mentioned earlier, Austin is kind of the newest one in his position, but he's got a great team working. So I'm stepping in after this position had been vacant for over a year and having to really get started from scratch. I actually found a lot of this information just recently for this presentation. The Thomasville Genealogical History and Fine Arts Library was founded in 1988 by Marguerite Neal Williams. She was a dedicated historic preservationist and civic leader. It was originally housed in the East Side Middle School building, which you can see at the top. And I thank the Thomasville History Center for having all of these photos available. I also had the help of one of my wonderful volunteers, Ms. Frida Mitchell, who every time I thought that I spotted the building, she would correct me and say, no, that was the high school. There's an extra window there or something. But the Genealogical Library was housed in one of the upper rooms of this building. And today, this is actually the Center for the Arts Center. And then in 1997, the Genealogical Library was outgrowing this room. It moved to Broad Street into the rehabilitated post office. And as Nancy mentioned, I kind of learned this history. The public library had been in this post office up until 93. And then they built their new library and moved about half a street over. And so the post office had sat vacant for at least 3 years, and the city was considering tearing it down. And Marguerite Williams, because she'd not been able to save the original library, she purchased the post office so that the Genealogical Library could move into it and had it rehabilitated. So that's where it was from 97 on. But they also held several different organizations in there as well. So this is just a little bit of background. Marguerite Neal Williams set up the endowment for the Genealogical Library, which helps us today. Her vision for historic preservation, I believe, has helped every one of our organizations. This is a photo of the original post office. And today it is still part of the Flowers Bakery Museum. I was only able to find one picture, the one on the right, of the sign for the Genealogy Library in front of the post office. And you can see these are in some of the opening ceremonies. You see Miss Marguerite Williams with the white hair and Mr. Jack Hadley. Again, he's been a part of everything in Thomasville, I believe. I have very few pictures of the inside of the building other than knowing that when they did relocate again, all of the furniture, the light fixtures, bookshelves, every single piece came with it, and they tried to recreate it as closely as possible. So in April of 2017, the Thomasville Genealogical Library, they've kind of taken the fine arts part off. They relocated to the Forbes campus of Thomas University. So as you can see, there's much better lighting, but almost everything is set up exactly the same. And this was their ribbon cutting ceremony in 2017. So once they got started, they had about 3 years there, or not even 3 full years, of course, before the pandemic hit. And so things kind of got off course a little bit. So I started this position on January 7th this year. So I am just at a little over 9 months, I believe. I have started right away trying to preserve the building, take care of structural issues, kind of giving it a little bit of a facelift as well. And yes, I do like to say this, meet the team. Hello. I am the only staff member, the only faculty there. I do have a wonderful team of volunteers that include my mother and aunt, and also Miss 𝘗𝘁𝘳𝘵𝘮𝘳 Mitchell, who is the former heritage librarian at the public library, who's retired. But I've tried my best to incorporate volunteers, people who care about this history, care about the research that is being done to help everybody. Some of the resources that we have, of course, are family materials. We offer public access to many genealogical resources, including newspapers, military records, special collections. We also have access to Ancestry Library Edition, Fold 3, Newspaper Archive, newspaper.com. And I think by my second week, I made sure that we were a Family Search affiliate library. And that is particularly important because several of the Thomas County collections, including the Hopkins collection, that have been microfilmed by the Family Search Library are only available at affiliate libraries. So unfortunately, that's not one you can access from home, but you can access it from the library. We are normally open to the public Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11 to 6 p.m. And we try to stick with our original motto, enriching the present while preserving the past. I have several objectives that I'm working on, and especially in expanding the services in 2026. Some of my key priorities are creating a digital inventory, which did not exist when I started. There was only a card catalog. Yes, I'm seeing the faces in the audience. So my wonderful aunt has already inventoried, I think, 4,500 books so far. And so we are doing this, and another volunteer has started putting barcodes on everything so that we can do a digital inventory, and that could be added to our website so that people can see what's available from afar. We're really trying to bring it up into the 21st century. We're also trying to enhance any digital records that we have, which, because our staff is so small, but also the resources, we are up under the umbrella of Thomas University. So I don't have the access at the moment to maintain a website because everything has to go through the university. So that's why I'm trying to partner with other organizations to help with digitization, and these programs can be hosted possibly through their websites. And as always, we have many volunteers who do come who can help with genealogical research and help breaking down those brick walls. As far as future goals, if you have ever met me, you know that I love community outreach. I love connecting, making connections. So I plan to offer specialized classes covering topics from beginning your genealogy, advanced genealogical research, African American genealogy, and DNA analysis. And this will be while using all of our websites and databases that we have. I look forward to strengthening the partnerships of local historical organizations and the genealogical societies in the region, which there are 5 active genealogical societies in Southwest Georgia. And also fostering a collaborative projects to preserve and share Thomas County's rich history. This was one of my first programs that I got to do at the Moultrie Library. And you can even see Katie in the picture in the back.
I'm very well hidden. I'm not well done.
But one of the things that we've learned today is people like to get out, but not everyone is capable. So I really look forward to being able to do hybrid classes so that we can offer those not just to the people who are there, but people from afar as well. As far as research assistance goes, we do offer that at the library, and I can help with specifics in Thomas County as well as Georgia. A lot of the research strategies is pulling from original records. So if it's something that we do not have, I will do my best to find that information I spent all day yesterday scanning over 350 documents here at the archives that were original to Thomas County. So I also work with other historical libraries and archives to gather any type of collections like that, and of course, reach out to my partner associations for records that they might have. As far as outreach goes, this is, again, one of my favorite parts of my job. On the top left is a picture of the cemetery at Pebble Hill Plantation, which I'll be working with the curator there to do a cemetery tour next year. And we're going to be doing, if you know me, I also love to do classes on cemeteries. So I'll be doing several of those later this month. The photo on the bottom left is actually of the Hopkins collection at the Thomasville History Center. They have the original Hopkins collection, the original papers, which Elizabeth Hopkins created beginning in, I believe, the 1920s or even earlier than that. But they are on family history, cemeteries. A lot of these are just written on the front of notebooks, as you can see in the image right here. I actually recognized this one from the microfilm collection. And at the very top, it's talking about the Hendry Cemetery. And that's actually one of my family cemeteries that goes by a different name today. And I was so excited to see this document. She also documents some African-American cemeteries, and she was there mentioning when people were buried and who they were buried beside, in which their markers might not be there today. So it's incredible information. The middle photo on the top, this was at an event where I hosted the Georgia Genealogical Society at the Thomasville History Center. And that is one of the presidents of the Tallahassee African American Genealogy Society and the South Georgia Genealogy Society. And Miss Parita Mitchell, you can see her in both of these photos. Again, she is my second mother, third mother. I've had many. And then the bottom photo in the middle, this was, I think, my second week at the job, where we did a tour on a Saturday morning at the Jack Hadley Museum. So that is where I first met Sarah. And we have worked together since then on several research projects as well that we've used the resources they have, as well as the resources that I can find available and kind of go further a few more generations. And then this photo on the far right, these are archival boxes of original newspapers for Thomas County. Miss Parita is actually the one, I believe, who rescued these newspapers, and the Thomasville History Center was able to store them, but they had not been microfilmed and there were no copies. So I reached out to some of my friends who work at Storied, and they own Newspaper Archive. They are actually taking the original newspapers and adding them to their collection, which are many more than these. So it's actually several hundred newspapers. And in exchange for adding them to their website, they are doing this digitization for free so that these early newspapers can be available to the public. And again, this is just kind of reiterating the collaboration that we have together. I really love collaborative works. I'm a big believer in no one organization can provide everything. You need help. You need other people who have resources so that you can focus and specialize on what you have available. I do look forward to working with Landmarks more. That is the one organization that I've not worked with as much. But me and Nancy have met together, and she has an incredible research room there that I look forward to helping patrons with as well. And so I think that is it for my presentation.
So if we could, if everybody would bring their chairs here to the center, and we'll start with questions. If anyone has questions, I know we'll get to your question first. And then I do have some additional ones if anybody has. Yeah, they roll.
Oh,
And then I do have a microphone for everyone to share. It's dead. We'll try our best. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to get the camera here too at the same time. Multitasking. Okay. Is that everybody in there? Okay, well, let's go ahead and answer her question first, and then I'll get to you ladies here. Yeah. So would you mind re-asking? Yeah.
As everyone's aware of, there's been a lot of changes in our country and our state with regard to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as efforts to try to remove critical race theory, basically Black history from the school curriculum. My question is for you all, any or all of you can answer this. Has that had an impact on your ability to do your jobs, to get grants for your different programs such as construction and rehab of facilities, things like that?
So thankfully, we have a really great relationship with the Thomasville and Thomas County schools. So we haven't been impacted by any children not being allowed to visit the museum. And since we are sharing the truth, we don't have any restrictions. I follow the Georgia state standards, but I make sure that the history that we are teaching is truthful and ethical. So we don't have any issues with that. We have had grants that we have lost in the past year taken away from the federal government. So we have had a little bit of impact with that, but thankfully our donations and our supporters are empowered by that. So they are more willing to give money because of that. So
The
that
grants are for example, can you give one example?
yeah, so there was a grant that we received from the government. It was over $400,000. We had two of them, $500,000 in total. One of them was focusing on being able to digitize Mr. Hadley's history. So being able to do an oral history project and focusing on that. And then another was to help with exhibit design costs for the new museum. But we are still moving forward with doing the oral history project with Mr. Hadley because we want to make sure that his story is shared. So that is something we're going to be doing regardless if we have a grant or not. And we did have one of the grants reinstated, but we're just waiting to see if we will get the money or
One
not.
of those grants, federal or state? or
Federal.
both?
Federal.
Thank you.
Question is, how do you go about partnering with the other people in the community to support? In my county, it just seems to be very difficult to find support.
So, the question is just how do you go about doing partnering and doing collaborative work in your community?
Sure. I'll start.
Please.
Thomasville and can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Okay. Thomasville is small and we know one another. And we know one another pretty well. Staff from our organization meets regularly to talk with one another. The directors meet regularly to talk with one another. And we're pretty free in conversation. So we understand what issues are. And if one of us, for example, Sarah's boss, Daniel Pittman, expressed concern for the condition of the Imperial Hotel. They're not preservationists. And this light bulb went off with me. And I thought, well, then perhaps they need to understand building condition. I knew Eric. We were able to negotiate a project and it's blossomed honestly from there. And so we start with an initial project and then find that that initial program creates multiple opportunities to do other things if we choose to pursue.
So in other words, are you saying too that your situation is not political? Because sometimes you run into those kind of situations, everything becomes political, especially nowadays.
And I think I'm the longest tenured with my organization of those up here. And so even my predecessor and that level, their predecessors were meeting regularly. So this is just something that Thomasville has routinely done. And no matter the generational amongst these organizations, Nancy's right. When the directors sit down and meet, it's a very frank discussion. Maybe I'm up against something. A couple of the institutions had some HR issues. we're small, an HR department. And I didn't major in HR, if there is such a major. And so we actually were able to, yes, there is, but we were actually able to work together and meet with an HR specialist. And so we meet about quarterly with him, who's just helping us to handle that. That's one example that's unrelated to history and this, but how something so important, but we were able to use, and share resources, and he's happy to meet with us, in that way. But as Sarah said, the educators meet routinely, but it's something that is just, I think, across the board in Thomasville, we all support each other, and it's not political for us. If these organizations are successful, Pebble Hill is more successful. And I think everybody feels that same way. So I'd like to build on that. The environment I was coming from, it was very much, there were multiple organizations, historical, genealogical libraries, but they all kind of did their own thing. They didn't really want to work together. Some of them had been established for over 50 years, and they did not want a new organization coming on. And there was no way to bridge the gap. So I was exceptionally excited to know how well this worked together. And I hope other organizations will see that even long-standing places like Pebble Hill and my position, which, like I said, has been vacant for a while, they welcomed me right in. And we've been working and collaborating together.
But see, that's one of the issues, is that just exactly what you said. And so you had to leave that environment to go to and find another environment. That's
it's moving closer to family too. So as far as but I'm hopeful that this will show other organizations that working together, it's not infringing upon one. It's actually building your organization stronger. For example, we've got pamphlets and different things over here. I try to keep information on every organization at my library. I don't want anyone to come in and think that I'm the only repository, the only place to find information. You have to promote those others and promote each other, and you're going to build that relationship so much stronger. And we have a relatively new within this year tourism director for Thomasville. And she's one too that works with all of us to help promote across the board things that are going on. And so, from the tourism perspective, Thomasville was a very early Main Street for Georgia program. And so the merchants, the downtown is exceedingly active. And so they're always happy to put up posters of events or share things. So it's not just our institutions, it also, flows out into the community. But I would just reiterate, I think all of us recognize that if, the more successful each of us is in our area and in promoting the community and what we have, the more successful we as a community and as a whole.
And say, I'm sorry, we'll go ahead and get your question and I'll get you next. Yours.
Just to follow up on the earlier question, I'm impressed with the number of organizations you have in a relatively small place, as you said. You're building, you're renovating buildings, you're building new buildings. Where does all this money come from? How do you get all this money? Thomasville must be a wealthy place. Sure.
I will say this. So me coming into this newly, I don't quite have that. This is one reason I'm reaching out. But, things like donations and memberships are the big things, but I can let some of the large organizations speak on that. For example, you have program. A lot of these are programmed. It's not something I have available yet, but I hope to in the future. So Pebble Hill has the most assets and the most buildings. Pansy left an endowment for the property, although it is not, as large as we would wish that it would be. And we are working to lower the percentage that we draw from that. That is what fills our gap. But we do have admissions. We do have 3,000 acres. Most of that is in hunting lease. We have long-term rentals. We do the events. But I will say that our board of trustees is primarily family members from the Hannahs. And until 2020, we did not fundraise. Now, we should have, but we didn't. So we hired a fundraiser, a development director who started March 17th of 2020. It was an interesting, it was an interesting time, but I will say that we just did a letter appeal to people, friends and family of Pebble Hill. And later that year, and it was very successful. That is something that we are growing, but we are new to this. We are new to the world of grants and other things. We should have been there, but you look past and see what you should have done, not what you are. But it's a struggle. Thomasville is a very, very strong community that has people who are very generous. But we all, I think, have to look outside of the community for some of the kind of resources that we need. We constantly have, there is no lack of building work that needs to be done. Eric showcased even more than we realized when he did his survey. But the community is generous, but we all have to look outside of that.
I'll give you a quick example. Our office building dates from 1833. It's the oldest two-story building in Thomasville. And we have reached the point where we have to replace not only the front porch, but the back. And it's quite expensive. A local organization has given us a challenge grant. There is another source that is willing to donate milled lumber, which reduces the amount of money we have to raise. And now I'm looking for donated paint and other materials to further decrease. So you have to get out there and hustle, but not all donations need to be in the form of cash.
So like in kind type things.
Yes, I do.
More information on the Thomasville Landmarks. Okay.
Just more up here.
She has a newsletter.
Does
Yeah.
you have the tax, what they're trying to put out with some county?
What was the question?
Expenditure or something?
Tax
Tax.
expenditure?
Yes, do they have breakdown of that?
Do you have a breakdown of tax expenditure?
I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, I'm not sure. For the organization, for the,
Like, do you have an
What's the
actual
county
budget?
of Thomas?
what county?
Thomasville.
Thomas County.
Thomas County.
So what are they gonna pay?
We're at the very bottom of the state, just ahead of the Florida line.
Is the question, do you get money from the county? Is that your question?
Is that the question? Yeah, I'm talking like the housing. Do you have housing for anybody?
I think this is more just,
Historic.
historical preservation.
Historic tax credits. Is that what you mean?
She asked if you have housing.
I got
Regular taxes.
We
what?
our headquarters building, and we help with rehab on various projects, but we are not a real estate company or a construction company. Does that answer your question?
So no one lives on any.
But I heard you say something about. You have to have this historical.
Porch, are you thinking of that? We're getting donated materials for that.
This office.
But that's for this particular.
Historical stuff. Residential.
I'm sure there are in Thomasville, but not these organizations. These are historic preservation for the most part.
You should check with your state or to see if there's any kind of programs particularly for seniors. I know I have a friend who's doing something in Michigan where they do, I don't know if I'm answering that.
I got, they have like a celebration of certain Asian, Hispanic, and enough, and then like October 14th, they're gonna have like a festival of Hispanic. I live predominantly with Hispanic people.
They're gonna have it in Thomasville or
In
somewhere.
here.
Oh,
in the
okay.
city,
Okay.
yeah. So I don't get a lot of information about.
outside.
They
Okay.
speak enough language and stuff like that. But I know I went to try to find Thomasville one time and I was there. I went like on Greyhound and I was ended up in Tallahassee.
Overshot it. Well, not in Thomasville. You have to go to Tallahassee and then come north.
You have to go to
They used to, but they don't even go to Tallahassee, but that's about 45 miles. So when we say we are just north of the state line, we mean we are just north of the state line.
So actually, there's no transportation there to go directly there. You have to drive up there.
Drive or fly, there's an airport. But it's private, so you're flying into Valdosta or Albany or Tallahassee.
And then driving
And then
either way.
driving.
Yeah. Did anyone else have any questions?
But I still don't understand the landmark. Is that the historical things you talked about?
Yeah. I did have a couple of extra questions as well. So I'm gonna look over these real quick because you guys have talked about some of these already. But let's see. So, you do focus a lot on reaching audiences within Thomasville. How do you reach different audiences, outside of that area? Do you try to, do broader outreach, or are there specific groups that you're trying to engage more directly?
Say that coming in recently, I do a lot with social media, reaching out to public libraries, do a genealogical information. I use Conference Keeper to get things out. But I try to reach out to state levels as well to try to spread the word. A lot of people share different events as well. And then the more on social media you like something, you get more notifications. So I try to share any events going on with the other organizations as well. And I know Sarah does a good bit of collaboration.
So one of our most successful programs, every single Black History Month, we have a virtual book club. So we select a book about African American history, and then every Thursday night we meet on Zoom. And we have people from all across the country that join. We also had an international visitor. He came to the museum from, I believe, Scotland a couple years ago, and then he stays up until midnight, 1 o'clock every single Thursday and joins the book club with us. So a lot of our audience are people that come to the museum, hear about Mr. Hadley's story and history, just fall in love with the place and then stay connected through that. But that's been our most successful program that we do.
What book are you reading?
So we're in the process of trying to figure out what book we're going to read. For next February, we read the 1619 Project, Driving the Green Book. And then last year we read The Sergeant, which is about the sergeant. It's about an African-American who was born in Africa, captured, sold into slavery, taken all across Europe, comes to the United States and becomes a sergeant during the Civil War. Then he comes down to Thomasville and Atlanta and all these areas and sets up freedmen's schools and helps children with education. The Sergeant, yeah. It's a really great book. So we're thinking about doing a comprehensive history, hopefully, about African-American history to celebrate 100 years of Asala and then 250 years of United States next year.
It's 107 different, but come on here.
I'll put that on the list.
So it starts in February. Does it go all year long then, or
It's
just February? Okay.
We too use social media, and we just send press releases out. We have 2 board members, one lives in Canada and one lives in New York. And so some of their connections have helped us spread the word. Our art collection is one of the top private collections of sporting art, and that is a very niche market. But at the same time, it has caught the eye of a number of publications and other things. One organization that's not represented here, every year there is a Thomasville Antique Show, and they bring in speakers as well as vendors and other things. And their speakers usually come and obviously Antique Show, they come and tour with us at Pebble Hill. And they usually will give us a shout out on social media, and we always get additional followers from that. But last year we had 34 foreign countries represented, 49 states plus the District of Columbia in our tour records.
When's your antique show?
That is, it's not ours, it's in Thomasville, but it's the last weekend in February. And so, you know, Thomasville is a remarkable community with its connections outside of Thomasville. I am from Thomasville, and I can still be amazed at how far and wide those reaches are. And if you come, you fall in love with it, whether you live there or not, I think, and then you help spread the word.
That's one of the best small towns you can go to in Georgia. Did you say tour records?
Our visitation last year represented the 34 foreign countries and 49 states plus DC. We didn't have Delaware. We didn't have Delaware this year.
Sad too, being down the road from Tallahassee, it can be really helpful, especially in terms of finding other colleagues to work with. I mean, you've got the whole state government there with Division of Historical Resources, and I was, full disclosure, working for the Division of Historical Resources. You want to talk about political and every word is scrutinized, you know, that goes out in terms of interpretation. So I feel a lot more freedom in working in this space, but just having those resources to work with, the expertise, the other museum professionals, the universities, Florida A&M, Florida State University, great, you know, speakers, experts, historians, and also students who may be interested in an internship. So being closer to that bigger city with all this.
Yes.
Do you all get confused with Thomasville, the furniture making?
All the time. All the time. That's in North Carolina. You're correct. Yes. I said we have a new tourism director for Thomasville, started earlier in the year. And I think all of us said to her, that's North Carolina. That's not Thomasville, Georgia. So.
.net, which is a directory. It shows me some of the things there in Thomasville. I don't see very many businesses, large businesses.
That, I'm not sure where that one, is that for the genealogical library?
Oh, no, I got it here.
Can't see.
Yes.
So I have a new one.
Is that for the genealogical library? Okay, that is one from
This is History Center.
No, I think that's the one for the genealogical library, but that is from the 90s, early 2000s. So this is not relevant information.
Outdated.
I'm not sure where that one came
And
from.
Rose.net is the local city government that we have the city has, you know, utilities and email addresses and cable, well, not cable, it's streaming anymore. And Rose.net is that domain for those. So I doubt there's very little left on that site. Camera.
I'm still working on updating kind of flyers for my library because again, we've just had to get new email addresses, new phone numbers. We're still working on a website. So hopefully by next year, I'll be able to have an updated information card. I do have business cards up here that I can share. And we have a Facebook group. But like I said, I can't run a website through the university at the moment. So I'm still working on the promotional information for my institution.
But ThomasvilleGA.com is the general website that all of our websites you can get to from here. Thomasville GA or Thomasville, Georgia, ThomasvilleGA.com. That's going to be your hotels, your restaurants, your businesses, your attractions, you know, everything for the community.
And so this is pretty much for my curiosity. Looking ahead, there's, you know, topics or themes that you think local institutions to work together to address. You know, next year is the 250th anniversary of the U.S. And Lily let me know that 2026 is also Thomas County's bicentennial. So what kind of things are you guys looking forward to doing next year for these events?
So Thomasville has a committee for its bicentennial. And all of us are represented in some fashion in the committee or subcommittees. So there's going to be a kickoff event in January, and then all of our institutions and others in the community are either branding some of their annual events to accommodate bicentennial. Some people are doing new events. but then that will fold into the countries as well. But we are, trying to make sure that throughout the year, as I said, Pebble Hill's curating an exhibit, 200 years of Pebble Hill history. I think, others are doing that.
It sounds like you all have a really productive collaboration with your local school system. And that's something that a lot of places doesn't happen that much. Could you give us any more examples of things going on there and how that works?
I mean, we have an educator, our equivalent of Sarah on our staff, and I know that they work very hard with the schools. We bring all the 8th graders from the county high school to Pebble Hill, and we pull out primary source documents out of the archives. We meet those curriculum standards. We can do natural resource programming as well as, historical and other things. It takes work, to make those connections. But then we also get students. We have a private school in Thomasville, and they study John James Audubon. So we have 33 original Audubon works at Pebble Hill. So it's a different take on a school group coming, but they come for the Audubons and then learn more about that. So different ways along those lines. And Sarah's the educator in the group, so.
Yeah, I think the educator group that I was talking about earlier, it has representatives from all the history and cultural organizations, and we meet almost every single month. And we just really brainstorm different ways that we can try and target and get either ourselves going into the schools or get the schools coming to us. So I know this year we all made our own flyers and then just sent out one big promo, just saying, this is the pricing that you need to come to the museum, all of our sites. If you can't afford, at least for us, if you can't afford to come to the museums, we tell the schools, like, just come anyways, and we're not going to charge you all to come. So just being able to either have connections inside of the schools and then all be able to work with each other, that's really how.
So your school board, school superintendent are very positively oriented toward this, or is it more? Obviously if you're bringing all the 8th graders to Thomasville, that's somehow a system-wide policy that's going to be part of the 8th grade. I assume it's 8th grade Georgia history curriculum?
Yes, it helps that one of the 8th grade teachers is one of our docents.
Okay.
But
So a lot of it is there's clearly system-wide attitude toward this, but also you have just built, I assume over a long period of time, built really strong relationships with individual teachers.
Yes.
Within the
we have schools,
principals.
in addition to the 8th graders, we have schools that have come to us for years with, bringing a class, from the surrounding communities as well.
I can remember, I grew up in Mitchell County, which is one county over, and it was, I think actually elementary school, we did a tour of Pebble Hill.
And when I was young, I did a tour of the Thomasville History Center.
So it's something that has taken years and years and has grown up in this community. It did not happen overnight. As much as I wish some things could change overnight, they don't. So it takes work. It takes collaboration. I'm probably the first one when I started, I went knocking on everyone's door. Hi, what can we do together? I'm definitely the one in the group who will reach out and be the loudest, I think. But ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask the question or to ask for help.
But I would say yes, the school superintendents and the private schools in Thomasville, there's more than one, that we do all have good relationships with.
And we'll get to you in just one second. We'll go ahead here.
I'm asking this question because I am thinking from a genealogical standpoint of how nowadays, and especially since COVID, we no longer meet in person. Everything is Zoom, and I'm trying to figure out how you can revitalize, research of that nature.
So the question,
And that's why I asked the questions that I've been asked.
question is basically, how do you revitalize in-person research and meetings and groups and all that good stuff?
I'll say, probably I don't know what percentage, but a very high percentage of people that come to the museum with questions are, in Thomasville anyway, family history questions. And so for us, our exhibits and our interpretations generally focus on broader Thomasville history and how that fits into, regional, national history. But there's just a personal family interest on the majority of people that come to our museum with an inquiry. And so I feel like we need to make that history more personal and meaningful for them by collaborating with folks like Lillian, who can help provide that and sort of like package that information. We offer services where we can put together a report on, say, a historic house that people are living in and want to know more about. And so, but doing that also for family history with Lillian's help, because that's how we can engage people and keep them invested in coming back to the History Center as well, making that history personal and meaningful for them. And like I said, I'm from South Florida, and so coming to Thomasville, where I was from, I was born and raised in South Florida, and that was a rarity. And I was first generation. Here you've got 4 or 5 generations going back in Thomasville, Thomas County, which is amazing. And so all the families know each other, all that history's intertwined. And so,
And I'll add on that, one thing that I think will really help, you can find lots of genealogical information online today. Everyone knows that. But if you have a tie to this, and you can go to the History Center, the Jack Hadley, Pebble Hill, and see those artifacts, see the things in person, it brings the connection so much closer. I've been to the History Center multiple times, and every time I go, something else catches my eye. And so if you have a connection with something, even if it's not at your organization, I don't have as many artifacts at the Genealogical Library. A lot of things can be found online, but coming there, making the family connection, and then going to one of these organizations where you can see stuff, it draws people in. So normally if somebody's coming, they're coming to multiple of our organizations instead of just one stop.
that as someone who works in museums, like that's got to be one of the most rewarding, experiences, is to see the people that come in and really are, emotional or learning something new about their own family history. It's like, if you watch the show with Henry Louis Gates, Finding Your Roots, and you can get that kind of reaction, and it, really just means a lot to them, and it means a lot for us to be able to provide that to people. So.
So actually, did you have a question?
Oh, I was just thinking about some about the plantation. The Pebble Hill, I looked it up. I was just gonna mention, I used to take my daughter to a nursery that was named at the plantation. And my mother used to laugh at me so much about how they operated the thing. It was just like, it wasn't, professional, but it was a place to take her. She was like under 5 years old.
In that area? Yeah.
Near where I used to live at.
Okay, gotcha. We'll do these last 2 questions right here. We'll do the lady in the front and then the gentleman behind her.
I was just going to say, when she was asking about how can you encourage more in-person research and more getting people back into going in person rather than, and I appreciate any events that I can watch on Zoom because I can't always make it in person. But just events like this one today, like this, look at how many people are here. There's people downstairs, there's people here. And instead of because I'm not from Thomasville, so if I went to Thomasville, I wouldn't know everything there is. I might go into one place or go see one thing, but just being here today and seeing all of you, now I know there's a lot in Thomasville to go explore. And so events like this, I think, will help get people more interested in doing that more in-person, hands-on research.
And I'll add to that, if you come to any of our institutions, we're going to recommend that you go to all the others. Our frontline personnel, straight up the board, everybody's going to recommend all the others. So you wouldn't learn. There are others there.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of you, and it's been great. And I'm remembering a day about 2 years ago. I was working on an evaluation of the Imperial Hotel, and Nancy asked me to join her at a really quaint little church out on some plantation to look at, possibly to evaluate. And the executive directors, we talked and poked the proverbial wheels, and I said, well, I'll put something together. But I think I'm going to go up to the History Center because I think maybe they have something. I don't know. So I drove, I left, and I went to the History Center, and I sat, to your point about getting face to face with people. I sat with this guy who I told him what I was doing, and he said, well, we have a lot of resources. And then he sat back and he said, you know, though, I think I remember seeing a photograph of a car accident in front of that building from 1955 that we haven't digitized yet. I'll be back in touch. Yeah, okay. And sure enough, the next day in comes these 2 JPEGs of 3 or 4 photographs from the local paper that depicted a car accident in front of the Imperial. And that was only due because we had face-to-face time. From a selfish historic preservation standpoint, that was a holy grail to have your historic building in an historic context for me to study under a microscope, to look at the windows, to look at the finishes, to look at all the things that I want to be able to tell are historically significant or there or not there. But in that particular day, I had the opportunity to benefit from these collaborations you're talking. I would have come to the genealogical site, but I did not know enough to ask that question yet. And so maybe that opportunity will arise in the future, but I can just this is a testimonial. These collaborations are not just here this morning. They are legit down in that community, and they have reaped much fruit in my reporting for you.
It's just a beautiful example of how that collaboration really works. And hopefully people will be able to see that. So I want to thank you all for being here today. Thank you all for being here for Archives and Genealogy Day.